welcome to another episode of Conversations on Social Work Careers. I'm Jennifer Luna, and I am your social work career coach for the new Social Worker magazine. And today we have a great conversation for you. We will be talking to Allison Peeler. And Allison is an award-winning communications professional and licensed master social worker with over 10 years experience in leading in diverse areas such as marketing, content strategy, community engagement, community mental health, and family homelessness. She has a passion for creating and implementing holistic communication plans that increase visibility and drive recruitment and engagement, everything that the social work profession needs right now. Allison is highly skilled in content development, relationship building, and customer service provision. The way that Allison and I met was we serve on a committee for NASW. It's a committee on branding and just helping NASW to hone their branding, not branding skills, I guess their brand. And we've been working on this for about a year. And I was so excited to bring this conversation to our viewers because you're a non-traditional social worker, yet you've given so much to the social work profession and continue to give. So with that, I'd like to start by introducing Allison Peeler, and I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I am Allison. I've been a social worker since 2015 and remained licensed that whole time. First, I'll say that my population of choice to serve is social workers.
Awesome. That's great.
Y'all are my favorite. I used to work before I went to graduate school, I worked in community mental health and realized at some point that I wanted to expand and grow, and that pushed me to go to graduate school. While I was there at University of Texas at Arlington, I learned about the community administrative practice track that they offered there. I didn't really know anything about macro social work when I started. I had done direct practice. I had worked with at-risk homeless youth. I had done some work in a program with doing like a jail transition program for youth that were in adult correctional facilities. And I started to see that what I wanted to do was find a way to support social workers, to support the frontline workers that were there every day in the trenches and didn't have any time to put their heads up and say, hey, we're doing amazing stuff here. I kept hearing messages from my peers, things like, we don't do this for the money. This is going to be really hard work. I'm going to leave graduate school and make $35,000. And that's just fine because I'm doing it for the people. I'm doing it for, to be of service. And that made me mad. I got so frustrated by that message. Graduate school isn't free. I can't pay my rent or my bills with my passion for volunteerism. And this is a real and legitimate profession that's been around for, 100 years, doing the thing. And to hear people talk about it like it was just paid volunteer work was so frustrating. That spurred me into the idea of looking at what people's perceptions were about pay and about financial worth and professional worth in the profession, namely what social workers thought of that. So I did my research for my thesis on that topic. And you can actually, if you want to take a look at it, you can see it on my website, socialworthit.com.
We'll make sure to put that in the show notes too.
Okay, that sounds great.
I would love for people to see that.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. I haven't done a whole lot of new since then, but all of the content is still there and it's still relevant. I don't think it is something that is going to expire because it's an important topic. So what I learned from all of that is how important it was to focus on the messages that we tell each other, the messages that we share with ourselves and that we then, say out loud to our peers. We don't need to should on each other about whether or not we should care about money or not. We absolutely should. It should matter. I'll say one should. That should matter, and that's okay that it does. This is your job and your career, and that's really valid. So I realized that I wanted to lean into professional communication skills, so that what I could do is bring that back to my social workers, to my social work profession, my sort of primary professional, path, and share those things, because I think it's so important for us to be able to elevate not only the clients that we serve, that you all serve, but also ourselves and our professional voice and identity. So when I graduated, I looked for a number of different jobs, and I ended up, in graduate school, let me say this really quick. My internships led me to get to work in program development, and also in a marketing communications capacity at 2 different places. And then, so I realized how much I enjoyed that. And I thought, this is, a niche. This is something I can sort of carve out for myself. When I went to school, when I started my undergrad years back, I was an English major. So writing has always been a part of my story. It wasn't something that was like a brand spanking new. It just had sort of not carried the same weight as my helping professional work.
Okay.
But I thought, hey, let's bring it back. So I started doing that and really enjoyed it. I ended up getting a job with University of North Texas in their brand strategy and communications department as a senior communications specialist for the recruitment marketing team. That's a whole mouthful. Basically, we created all of the marketing strategy and campaigns to recruit and retain first-time in college students, transfer, and graduate students. So tons of communication. Yep. So internal and external communication skills, all of those things that that I, as a social worker, were second nature skills, were things that we do. We creatively problem solve. We look at the system and we identify where sort of the gaps are, and start to look at, like, what can we do to shift, not just plug, not just put a Band-Aid on necessarily, but like solve a problem. And so that translates sort of seamlessly into something like communications, or really anywhere for that matter.
I want to ask you a quick question about that. When you were applying for that job, it doesn't sound like they were looking for a social worker.
Right.
How did you sell yourself?
That's a good question. Well, I will say that career pivoting is a task. That is not easy, and you have to keep going. You have to keep pushing. So it did take a while for me to find a good fit to get started, because you're right. What I did was I sort of led with my communication strengths, the things that as a social worker, as a direct practice social worker I should say a direct practice specialist, because I wasn't officially a licensed social worker when I was in the mental health sphere. So don't want to misrepresent. But while I was doing that direct practice work, things like what I was sort of saying about creative problem solving, strategy, like thinking through somebody's treatment plan, even how to communicate with both client and family, and community. So you're always networking as a community liaison, as well as like individually with a client, solving those issues on a day-to-day, and engaging their family, like bringing them in. So you're listening to what they're saying, you're identifying what they need, and then catering your message to them to get them involved by focusing on those things. That's the same thing that we do in communications.
Yep, it's a true systems approach.
Yep. It's so one of my favorite parts about marketing and communications is strategy. It's looking at understanding who the who the client is. At UNT, it was students and their families, and internal partners too, but largely that, at the end of the day, that's who we were talking to and trying to connect with. And, you just have to think about it you have to sort of step out of like this one-to-one idea of skill and ability and think a little more macro, like how do these things relate? Like, what am I bringing to the table that I'm already doing? Like maybe I didn't necessarily specify how many biopsychosocial assessments I had done, or crisis interventions. But what I could talk about was the communication skills that I had, in networking with community partners and with clients and their families, and really being a connector. I always say because I'm a social worker, I'm a technical and relational communicator. So it's sort of both of those things rolled into one, which sort of helps bring the whole picture to light of how this sort of translates into.
Right, because you don't normally put technical and relational
Yeah.
and communicator in the same sentence. So that's wonderful.
Right.
That's a great brand.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see. Anyhow, so I worked there in public state higher education institution for 6.5 years and really loved it. Some of my other favorite things that I got to do in that time were, in addition to my sort of my primary communications role, was how important it was for me to stay connected to social work. So since I was doing something that was sort of off the map, it became critical for me to stay close to my peers because, like I said, I shifted with the idea that all of these tools and all of these things that I was gaining would be of service to the profession of social work in the end. So sort of hard to see at the very beginning of that, like
Right.
how that's going to translate. And sometimes I would talk to people and feel really small because I would say, well, this is what I'm thinking and doing. And they'd look at me like, you want to do what? And so I had to keep pushing forward because I was sort of on the path. And so what I did, I have some great friends in the NASW Texas Texoma branch. I joined NASW when I was in grad school and I stayed. I think that being a part of the professional organization does a couple of really important things. First, it elevates our profession because every time somebody joins, that additional cost of us paying our membership fee is more money that goes to promoting and elevating our profession wholesale. Everything that we do supports the entire profession. So we are helping directly by being members of our professional organizations. And whether it's the NASW or one of the other great social work orgs, that all serves a purpose of uplifting and elevating at its core. There's also great opportunities for networking. I have some great peers in the NASW Texas Texoma branch up here in Denton, Texas, and they helped me get involved in the NASW Texas Strategic Planning Committee. I think 3 years ago. It's been a long time. It's sort of a blur, the 2020, 2021, or like time froze. So I'm like, when was that? I think that's right. And so what I got the really an honor of getting to do was work with the Strategic Planning Committee and social workers from all over the state. We would meet, we still actually are continuing to meet once a month. And all of us work on different subcommittees as well, which there are 4. And the one that I've worked most closely with over the years is the branding subcommittee. So our team, we developed a plan, a strategy for what to do over 3 years. We were super ambitious about what we could accomplish in 3 years. My word of advice to the next committee, just keep it simple. We were sure we were going to get through a lot, and we did not, because, people are busy doing life and
Yeah,
doing their careers. And social workers in particular work really hard with their heads down. They work really hard to do the work, but they're
yeah.
not always able to also do sort of these extracurricular kind of things. And maybe that's true across all professions, but I see it a lot, among social workers for sure,
I
helping
also
professionals.
I also see, as a branding strategist for individuals, and particularly social workers, it's kind of a foreign concept to us. And we don't normally learn how to promote ourselves the way other industries do. And so just having a group of people to kind of wrap their mind around, what branding is and how to get there, I think can be a challenge too.
That's a really good point. Um, I branding and marketing, I think, feel oogie to helping professionals.
Yes.
My husband is a helping professional. I've spent so much of my time prior to working in marketing and communications as a strictly helping professional and not thinking about these kinds of things. We're not talking about sales
Yeah.
in the way that you might envision. So a thing that sort of frustrates me is that a lot of marketing roles for nonprofits are not what I would consider marketing. They're not traditional marketing, they're sales. So you are a sales rep if you are taking a position that's called marketing at most in many of those nonprofit roles. That's great. That's totally fine. It is not
Yeah.
what I do. What I do involves a whole lot of content creation, a lot of marketing strategy, a lot of learning. We look at, sort of buyer behavior, student behavior. We identify like all of these things. And I should say that I have recently changed jobs. So I said I was at UNT for 6.5 years, and now I have moved over to another job in education. It's an education tech company called EAB. You might be familiar with it, Jennifer. I feel like UT is a partner. But I serve the community college space. So
Mhm.
I help develop all of the marketing campaigns and collaterals that support student success among 2 years across the country. So it's a slightly different audience than what I was serving before, but I really love it. I'm learning a ton. And again, I had different skills that I could sort of lean on after working in higher ed marketing already, but I always lead with service. I think that's where at my core, I do my best work, is thinking through how am I being of service. So even to my peers and to the people that need stuff from me to be effective at their job, in supporting the partners, it's the same kind of thing. Like, how can I help? How can I be of service? And thinking through, from a strengths perspective, as well as a systems perspective, again, sort of that macro level, not getting too lost or overwhelmed in so back to what you were saying about branding and marketing being like sort of obtuse terms for folks. At their core, we're talking about like your unique personality in the professional space. Like, how do you sort of elevate above the noise of
Yeah.
everyone else sort of clamoring for, and you really want to like take a good look at what your own style is, what you
Right.
want it to be, and how you want to be. If somebody were to talk about you to, professionally, like what 3 words would they identify to describe you? And then lean into those things, unless they need some work. And then,
Yeah.
and that's okay. That happens, I'm sure, whatever. But, and we did a similar thing for the NASW Texas Branding Committee. So our big part of one of our biggest initiatives was to create a perception survey and send it out to social workers all over the state and ask questions to see what social workers think of NASW Texas. What do you think that our, sort of identity looks like? And people identified that NASW Texas is supportive, is an advocate, and is trustworthy. Those were the top 3. And then social justice was number 4, but it was just a very close number 4.
Yeah.
So obviously very important still.
Yes.
And then we took that data and sort of analyzed the other information that we got from the survey and provided some branding recommendations to the organization itself. And Jennifer and I actually got to present that to Will, to the executive director, just a week ago? Is that right? Or 2 weeks ago? Yeah, something like that. So, when you think about your brand, again, you're thinking about how to separate yourself from the herd a bit. How, like, where do you fit? And it doesn't have to be complex. Are you, like, are you a servant leader? Are you a strong communicator? Are you somebody that people come to with problems? Are you great at creative problem solving? Do you sort of have that savvy for that kind of thing? Are you a strategic thinker? They're not, these terms are not things that are probably too far from the realm of what you do every day. It's just sort of identifying them and asking other people. You can ask other people.
Yeah, I found it really helpful to do a personal perception survey with people that maybe 5 people that know you really well.
I love that.
And so as you go about this type of work, what are some of the challenges that you found?
Career pivoting, like I said, is hard. Before I specifically answer that, my social work education was very robust. I learned a ton of macro level social work skills, a limited amount of communication, of technical communication skills, of things that you would learn if you went into like a marketing or communications program per se.
Okay.
So I did a lot of self-teaching, a lot of personal, sort of growth, professional growth kind of things along the way for me that were things that I enjoyed, were things that I really wanted to learn, and however, going into a new sort of track and sort of putting your feet firmly on the ground and saying like, I belong here, not ever having imposter syndrome is like, woo, an impossibility. So I'd say that one is probably one of the biggest challenges. And it's very common for women. And especially there's research that talks about how women, as the higher they go up the food chain, the more they experience imposter syndrome. Add to that being a helping professional, where we sort of spend our time saying things like, oh, I just do this service for the clients. I have this sort of small bubble of, maybe you wouldn't say this, but like I have this small bubble and focus of like, I can work with clients and that's it. Right. And I don't think that's true. I think that, if you're in direct practice, you have a world of opportunities.
Right. That's so true.
In particular are incredibly transferable. And that doesn't mean dropping what you're doing and shifting to a different profession. It means, where can you expand in your role that sort of gives you some of these other skills? Like, where can you think about, like enhancing if there are some, marketing or communications efforts that you can learn about in your current organization, or fundraising, that's a really important skill that involves a lot of communication too. Program development. I really enjoy like building new models for doing things. And I don't necessarily develop programs as a senior content manager, but I develop marketing campaigns. Like, so we're, sort of taking these themes, we're like, okay, well, what do people want to know about? And so all of those kinds of things are skills that, where you can, sort of think of them as like flex opportunities. That's what we call them at my current job, actually. And they allow people to sort of shadow on different teams in the organization, which is
Oh,
super cool.
I really love that term, flex
I do
opportunity.
too. Yeah,
That's
I didn't make
exactly
that
what
one
it
up.
is.
That one
It's
is
just
cool, right?
right. It's like creating a niche for yourself. And one other thing that I really like that you said is, learning what the industry language is, because it's probably you're probably doing very similar skills as what something might be called in social work. But like, for example, fundraising, it might be called something different in the public sector, right? Like a campaign. And so being intentional about learning industry language and how you can translate that language into your own words.
I'm really glad you said that. I had been thinking about that before we talked, because that was actually a really huge part of sort of overcoming the hurdle of feeling like an imposter or like I didn't fit.
Yes. Yeah.
And that kind of skill, I think, is something that social workers, again, are like really set to sort of easily grasp or easily sort of assimilate into, because think about all of the different types of folks you work with, all of the different partners that you work with across the community, the organization, your board, like whoever it may be. Every single person you have a different way that you have to engage with them. They're
Right.
looking for different things, and you're providing those when you talk to them. You're providing their treatment goals. You're providing their report on, like the success or outcomes of your clients and how things are going.
We were really talking about just being able to transfer language. And
Thank you so much.
one of the things that I've seen is you have to dig out of that imposter syndrome and to be able to feel confident about articulating what you do and what you want to be called. And what I've seen in other industries, particularly in corporate industries, I look at a lot of job postings and I see job postings like chief people officer. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, what we do. And, it will have something to do with HR, but, well, they're not afraid to do that. So why should we be afraid to call ourselves a brand, specialist or, words that would make what we do more relatable to the industries that we want to get into.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, there are a lot of roles that, and surprisingly or unsurprisingly, I find social workers, in all of them. There's other social workers that work in our organization. I am always talking to social workers who, if they are not necessarily doing this kind of work or thinking in terms of communications or branding or anything, they have an interest in it, and probably even like a trepidation about pursuing it, like a feeling of like, I can't talk about that. I can't, I don't know it. And I think, again, just keeping it really simple, looking at like what you shared. I love that idea about sort of creating your own perceptions survey of sorts and asking 5, peers, tell me what words you would use to describe me. And like on the survey that we did and presented to Texas social workers, we gave them prompts. So do that or don't, for whatever you want to do, but starting to identify like how you are sort of presenting yourself to the world professionally is a great start. And in that way, you're identifying your personal brand without even calling it that.
Right.
I think social workers would do well to lean into conversations about branding and communications as really important technical professional skills to develop in graduate school and undergrad programs. that's something that I think is lacking, but it's really important because the way we communicate to others does absolutely tell a story about who we are professionally. So
Absolutely.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Considering that approach, how important that is, not just to serve our clients, but sort of like bigger picture,
Right.
how am I showing up in the world?
And we
Um,
have some hurdles to jump, just initially because, of perceptions that the public has about our profession. And when someone says, I'm going to call the social worker, it's can be likened to, I'm going to call the police or, something.
yeah,
And so just being aware that not everybody knows the work that we do and kind of going into conversations like that, being more
absolutely.
relatable.
Right. And so many social workers that I've worked with and know they're not we're not just CPS. A lot of us are, and that's fabulous. And I love and applaud every single one of you. But there are so many other opportunities where social workers can show up and take space. And I think that's up to us. We really
Right.
have that chance to do that. Our skills um, are transferable. They can grow and change. It is okay to sort of pivot in your role over time if you're interested. Um, our generation in particular, as well, I'm like year one of millennial, I think, but like millennials in particular have the highest prevalence of any generation of shifting careers.
Yeah.
That's not as common maybe in some other generations, and that's okay too, because where you are, that's perfect. But you can sort of start to think of in terms of like how you sell yourself professionally, because all of those things serve again to elevate and bolster the social work profession at large. Because, like you said, people do remain unclear about what social workers do. There's question: are we all just um, you know CPS workers that do
Right.
removals? And I no, that's absolutely not true. So everything that we can do, that I can do to promote and uplift the profession of social work at the state level and national, is, that's where I want to be, because I think it's so important for all of us to really clarify our space in the world professionally and sort of own it. There's no question what nurses do. There's
Right.
no question what teachers do. Well, that's not true anymore.
Yes.
There, we're all expected to wear a whole lot of hats. You already know how to do that. So this is just taking it a step further in a different direction. I think communication skills like have a place in our education programs. I think that we, constantly need to identify what our professional voice is and lean into that, and even share those common messages with those around us. Because the more that we sort of say consistent things about ourselves as professionals, the more trust and even sort of authority we're building about what social work itself is.
Right.
So
And the more
that's
confidence we're building amongst each
yes.
other, I think that's the most important part is just, feeling very confident about what our role is,
Right.
by being able to articulate the things that we do in a practical manner so that people understand and in a positive light. We're almost out of time. I have one more question for you.
Sure.
What advice would you give for social workers who would like to veer out into a non-traditional path?
Sure. First of all, don't limit yourself. Social work skills, like I said, are human skills. They're very based on connection. They're very much based on like relationship development. And so much of professional life is based on developing relationships. You can train someone on a job, on the technical parts of a job, you can't train them on work culture. You can't
Mhm.
train them on like those professional developmental relationships. It is essential to think about yourself in terms of like not just one-to-one skill, but like, what can I how can I be of service to this organization or group? Who's my client here of any kind? Insert whatever, at the end of that, and think about it from a servant leader perspective.
Yes.
Like what can you bring to the table? And probably that's a lot. As a social worker, we have a lot of unique skills and creativity. Um, it doesn't mean creativity doesn't mean you're an artist. It doesn't mean
Right.
that you paint or draw or write creatively. It means that you can sort of look at a situation with limited resources and options and find a way to make things work, make things happen. That's magic, you know?
Right.
Social workers have that ability, and it is like, woo, it's amazing. You don't see that across many
Right.
professions. There's a lot of, even in helping professions, that you get to a point and they say, well, that's the end of what I can do for you. Sorry. See ya, and I don't mean
Right.
that to be cruel. I mean that our professional reach is very broad. So own that.
Right.
Make that space for yourself and do what Jennifer was suggesting, and sort of do your own perceptions survey for yourself, for your own brand identity, as a professional.
And your friends will probably love to do that for you.
Yes, right, for
I
sure.
think that's something that peers really enjoy doing for one another.
I do
Thank you
too.
so much for your time today, Allison. Um,
Absolutely.
we'll put the link that to your project that you mentioned in the show notes. And also for our audience, if you have any questions, just drop them in the comment section of the YouTube video and we'll keep monitoring it. And thank you again. I'm so happy that you joined
Absolutely.
us today.
Thank you for having me. And if you want to share my LinkedIn profile too, I'm happy to take questions, or, if somebody wants
Awesome.
resume feedback or anything like that, just reach out.
I will definitely do that. Thank you.
Thank you.